If you're new to my channel, welcome to Tessicola Art. If you've been with me for a while, welcome back. In this tutorial, I'm going to be showing you guys my color mixing and blending and color sourcing techniques for working with this colored pencil brand, which is called Stabilo, or Stabilo. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly. I hope I am. These colored pencils produce such beautiful quality, portraits, anything that you want to create. The quality is just stunning. So I'm going to spill all of my secrets in this video. Like with every portrait I've done, I start with the eyes because there's so much to them and there's really no getting around how much layering and blending and mixing there is going on with just the eyes. With the iris as well as around the eyes, I focused on selecting colors that I only could see and tell were a part of the flesh tones. And the way to do that is to really focus on exactly what colors you're looking at. And with this particular portrait, there was a lot of kind of orangey, pinkish, reddish tones and a very harsh light on her, which I ended up being able to kind of figure out where it was coming from and how it was hitting her. It was kind of a tricky lighting situation with this particular portrait, which is actually what drew me to doing this portrait. As you can see, I'm adding some rosy red here and really blending that in, but also being mindful to add multiple layers with like this fleshy tone color, which is more like a burnt ochre or a light burnt ochre. And this is like a peachy color, which they say is like a light ochre, but really it's like a peach color or a flesh color. So I'm not just using that color though. I'm using multiple colors to really bring the eyes and the skin around the eyes to life. What really makes these colored pencils and their quality so stunning is how you use them. So you want to layer from dark to light. Be mindful to always smooth out every mark that you make, whether it's a shadow or a highlight. You want to follow with your blending stump or a tissue to really blend everything out. Now, as you can see, I'm going in with my mono eraser here, zero eraser, and just adding a little highlight to the eyelids. And then going in with my black pencil for some more defining and really getting really dark with the crevices there and the eyelashes. I worked this up in several layers because I didn't want to lose the boldness of the eyes. And sometimes with charcoal-based colored pencils, the blending and, blowing away the particles can sometimes, unfortunately, you can lose some detail in that process. So you really got to be diligent with your layering and highlighting and shadowing in the necessary areas. And every time you add a certain amount of layers of colors, you want to follow that with your white to burnish. And you want to make sure to define edges like I'm doing here, but not so much so, because with this colored pencil brand, it's so beautiful to make your edges a little bit less refined and a little bit more blurred, but there's a fine balance between those two elements. What drew me to this portrait was how light was hitting the face. And as you can see, I am starting with some undertones on the top part of the nose, which usually is very lit, it's very highlighted. But with this particular image, the way light was hitting her nose was very different than what I was used to trying to draw. And it really challenged me, but I knew that if I got it right, the quality would just be so beautiful. So as you can see, I'm layering from dark to light and starting in my super dark areas, being very light with my hand in the application of the colored pencil, and then always using my tissue after each colored pencil application. Then I go in with my white after I layer a couple of hues to really make sure that those highlights stand out and just really pop. But it really takes having an eye to get those very subtle details with the color and the color mixing, the highlights, the shadowing. You want to get it just perfect, and that will really add a lot of depth to the nose, and that's what you want to go for. After you burnish with white, you then want to go in with a fleshy burnt ochre, like a light burnt ochre, and glaze. Glazing is very subtle. You want to have a very light hand, and then you want to burnish that again with a very light hand with your white. As you can see, the tint, it was very light but still noticeable. Subtle but still impactful. For the mouth, you want to layer fleshy tones and pink tones and hues. And for the darkest areas, of course, you can use a very dark shade of like a lamp black or a Payne's gray. As you can see, I'm going in with multiple layers in the darkest areas, and I'm continuing to blend and burnish with the white and constantly lightening up the upper lip and lower lip and the top part of the lip. I'm really trying to add a lot of dimension and depth, and that's what you want to strive for. Burnt ochre, or this light burnt ochre, was the base color that I pretty much relied on throughout the entire portrait. And then I'd follow with this rosy hue, and I would blend those together with my tissue and layer those colors with a light pale yellow, which emphasizes that a highlight was hitting her in that specific area. I wanted the shadows to be, of course, easy, subtle transitions, but the way I layered the colors just had to be very specific to achieve a certain effect. Like here with the mouth, I'm darkening the upper lip because it is typically a little darker and it is in the photo, and I'm layering the lower lip again, and then I'm going to add some more white, and I'm going to press really hard with the burnish here to make sure that these last layering effects really make a difference. Again, I'm using my burnt ochre base color and then following that with my tissue for nice blending, and then following that with my pale yellow to emphasize the highlights, or the strong highlights that are hitting her face, and following that with a peachy light ochre, and then returning to my pale yellow and going into the areas that are well lit, and then following that with this rosy red to give her complexion that beautiful glow and make sure those highlights really stand out. And here I've added a magenta color to her cheek to complement the sweater that she's wearing, which we'll get into later. Then I'm going in with my blending stump and gradually defining the side of her face there, the edges of her face. As you can see, I didn't even use my pencil, I just used the blending stump because I want to maintain a softness as the form emerges. I may have said this in previous tutorials, but on the face there are no harsh lines or edges. As you can see, I am creating these protruding areas and crevices with just using light and shadow. Light colors and dark colors. In this case, I am layering with white to really bring out those highlights and light colors, and a burnt sienna and reds and some darker hues just to add some more depth, but no harsh edges. This light red color that I blended in just made such a beautiful blush tone, and it really made her cheeks glow in the most beautiful way. Then I went in with an actual very light orange color just to create the feel that all kinds of light was hitting her face. It's very clear that natural lighting and maybe some artificial lighting was hitting her face in this image. Her forehead was a little darker in some areas, but I still followed the same colors and the same blending technique as in other areas of this portrait. Here I layered the burnt ochre and the orange and the red and a burnt sienna in the darker areas. However, I kept some areas like above the eyebrows there lighter, between her eyes a little bit darker because there's a slight curvature leading up to her forehead, and underneath her hairline, of course, was really a lot darker. You can see now where the highlights are most predominant and where the shadows are, but it's all done with a very subtle approach, and that's what you want to, that's how you want to tackle this colored pencil brand. And here I'm going much darker under the hairline because there was a lot of shading there and shadowing, but you see how the structure is really emerging. It's slowly starting to feel like it's growing off the paper. That's what you want. The hair was the most frustrating and challenging with this portrait. I have not drawn permed hair in a long while, and it really took a long time just to get the direction of the strands and the curls correct and make sure that some areas were a little more defined than others and highlights were more obvious than the shadows, which I really delved into towards the end of this video. The challenging part about this colored pencil brand that I want to mention is making sure you have a smooth transition between the super dark areas and the super highlighted areas, but to make sure that there's a smoothness in your application. Like, see here how I'm constantly going in with my blending stump, and I'm still being mindful to define areas like around the jewelry here, but the jewelry was kind of blurred out, like her hand and her arm were blurred out a bit. So when you go in with your blending stump and your tissue, you can make some beautiful blurred effects. What's nice about a more charcoal-based brand is it allows you to be more flexible with how you apply the medium. So if you want things to be a little bit more blurred, it's very easy to achieve that effect. And that's what I absolutely love about this colored pencil brand. All the different effects that you can create with it. I think you get the drift with my approach with this colored pencil medium. So we're going to skip the neck and actually dive right into the clothes. She was wearing many layers, a kind of a pale pinkish brownish sweater or cardigan on top of a white polo button down with a dark striped shirt underneath that polo shirt. So a lot of layers going on. There was a lot of color mixing to make sure I got the correct hues and value scales, and I really went to town with the blending here. I will be sure to post in the description box below the colors and hues I used for the flesh tones in this image. And I want to stress that it's more than just using orange and white or like a flesh tone. When you're working with flesh tones, you want to mix many colors, but the right colors. And that's what I really want to stress with this. With the clothes, you can be a bit loosey-goosey with blending colors, but with the skin you want to accurately color source and make sure you're getting the correct tints and shadows and tones and a nice glow to the complexion of the person you are drawing. The other thing I love about these colored pencils is their ability to capture reflections. Like here, color is reflecting off the collar. Her pink sweater is reflecting off her white collars, and even her neck, her skin, is very slightly reflecting off the collar there. And I wanted to very subtly emphasize those details, but still make them obvious enough. For the blurred background, I could tell that the person I was drawing was outside when the photo was taken. So I layered blocks of color and I made sure to blend and drag and kind of smear the color a little bit to make it look blurry, to give it that blurry effect. And that's what you want to do. It's really a matter of color blocking and blending and layering to get that blurred effect.